Hello. Sometimes people come and ask, how do you know what to automate? In other words, should we automate everything? Should we automate some things? I mean, how do you determine that? So it's an excellent question, and I decided to put a little presentation here to show you how I approach it. And you can obviously use the same approach or use something else. So first of all, the question cannot be answered, number one. If anybody's telling you this is what you should automate, turn around and go talk to somebody else, okay? The reason for that is because they don't know your business. They don't know what you do. They don't know how you do it. They may have an idea, but they don't know. So with that being the case, unless they know, they can't really recommend to you what you should automate in terms of your daily, monthly, weekly activities. Using this particular framework, you'd be able to have at least some idea of how you can approach it. And you don't need to ask anybody, should I automate this or should I not automate this? You just use this simple approach to figure it out on your own. Let's talk about why you should automate anything. And the reason for automating things is because obviously if you can do something automatically without you being involved, that means that you can spend your time doing something more productive or something different or something more important to you. So automating is definitely something that makes a lot of sense because it's almost like you having multiple versions of you, each one dedicated to doing a particular task. You can think of automation as a multiplier of capabilities. That's the easiest way probably to look at it. And it'll enable you to do a lot of things that you couldn't do before because you simply didn't have time. But now since you're automating some things that used to take you an hour, 2 hours, 15 minutes, whatever it might be, now you're able to get more things done because you're getting some time back. So that's probably the biggest reason why you'd want to automate things. Another reason is errors. Whenever you're doing something on your own or one of your employees does it, there's a possibility that they will make a mistake. And so if you get computers in the mix and you set up some kind of process that automatically handles the task and you verified it and tested it and make sure it's working correctly, then it's going to be working exactly the same way all the time. So it doesn't make human mistakes, which is a big plus also. The first pillar I would say is if you're looking at anything that's complicated. The second pillar is difficult. Third pillar is if it's time consuming. Next one is recurring. Anything that you're doing over and over again. The fifth pillar is if it's expensive. And finally, if there is anything that you're doing, any kind of task that you're doing manually, definitely should be considered for automation. Because then you can get more time back and you can do something more meaningful. So the idea is to look at each one of these as a separate entity when you compare it to tasks that you actually do and figure out how many of these 6 actually apply. And the more of these pillars apply to your tasks that you do daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the period may be, that would make it more appropriate to automate than not. In other words, if you only do something that's complicated, consider automating it because it's going to help you out. If it's something that's complicated and recurring and expensive and manual, then that's obviously a lot more reasons to consider automating that. And if it's all 6 of them, absolutely automate it. So let's talk about each pillar one at a time. Anything that's complex should be consideration for automation. Why? Because potentially people might make mistakes when they do something complicated, and it requires a certain amount of knowledge, potentially education, to be able to do something complicated that the person may or may not have. Many different reasons why something complicated is something that would be nice to offload to somebody else to do or something else to do, in this case computers to do it, because it eliminates any issues related typically with performing complex tasks. The next one is difficult tasks. And this one is fairly self-evident that if you're doing something that's really taxing for you mentally or physically, in other words, it's difficult to get done, then you might want to consider automating it because if you keep doing it, then potentially you'll make mistakes or somebody else will make mistakes because of the difficulty level. And that would create obviously problems for the task itself and for the business in general, potentially, depending what the task is. So you're trying to eliminate errors by automating anything that's difficult. Okay? And again, as I mentioned before, because you're automating it on the computer level, once you've tested the process itself and it's doing it properly, then you don't need to worry about computer making mistakes like spelling errors or some other kind of errors. So it makes sense to automate anything that's difficult. The next one is time consuming, and that's pretty also self-evident. If you're doing something that takes you 2 hours a day, and all of a sudden you can put together an automation process that handles it for you, then you're saving 10 hours a week, more than a day. In a week you're saving, and that's every single week. So it definitely makes a lot of sense to automate anything that takes a lot of time. Recurring activities, something you do all the time, and you need to look at it on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis, and even potentially even on an annual basis. It's just the longer the period of time, the less important it is to automate that particular recurrence. For example, if you're doing a report that takes you 15 minutes once a year, you need to consider the expense involved with automating things and testing them and everything else versus does it really make sense to save 15 minutes a year? Okay? And if it does, then absolutely automate it. But if you look at it from a standpoint saving 15 minutes a day, now we're talking about some serious time accumulating over time, definitely much more important to automate in that case. You have to look at the frequency of these recurring events to determine how impactful automating them would be. And so anything that's daily would be much more impactful than weekly and then monthly and then annual. And then number 5 is, does it cost you a lot of money to do a particular task? Let's say you have a task that takes 3 employees to accomplish. And so you multiply the salaries of these 3 employees by the amount of time it takes them, and you see just how much it's costing you. If that's something you can automate, then obviously you're not paying them. You're going to be potentially saving money, and that's the name of the game. The more money you can save, the more money you can make. So you have to look at all of these things. And of course, you have to keep in mind in terms of how much it costs you, not just in labor. There's also things like error remediation. In other words, if somebody screws something up, you need to fix it. How much time does it take? How much does it cost you? Also, potentially the opportunity costs. If you get these things done in much more effective manner, then you're potentially going to save some costs, generate more money. Pillar number 6, the final one, is manual processes. And that's probably the most self-evident from the standpoint that anything you're doing, you're consuming time to get done. You're doing, your employees doing, doesn't matter. You're basically taking time to get it done. And if it's something that needs to be done, you don't have any choice. You got to get it done. But if it's something that could be done by a computer, now you can be spending your time doing something more important, something more relevant. So anything that's manual, preferably, would be delegated to computers and automation. That includes things like data entry, you have paper-based workflows, QA, reports, and similar. You have more time on your hands to do whatever you'd like to do that's more important or more relevant. So when we look at all of this stuff, going back to what I said earlier, the more of these pillars you can attach to any particular task or set of tasks, the more benefit you're gonna get back from using automation. Okay? If you only have one of 2 of these pillars, you're gonna get a certain amount of ROI back. If you're gonna have 4 of them, obviously you're gonna get much more. If you're gonna have all 6, absolutely you're gonna have even more. So because of that, that's why under 6 pillars, I'm indicating that it must be automated. So if you have something that's complicated, difficult, manual, expensive, time-consuming, all of these things put together, you need to automate. Okay? The final little pro tip there, it says when all 6 pillars are present, delaying automation means leaving significant value on the table every single day. That's exactly what's happening, because automating things gives you time back. And so if you don't take that time back to do something more meaningful with that time, that means you're wasting time. It means you're spending money and you're not making more money. So you're leaving money on the table, essentially. You're not being as efficient as you could be if you had the automations in place. So that's also something to consider. It's not just making things easier and faster for the sake of that, but it's also about making the most of what you have with the resources you have to be able to generate more business as opposed to losing business due to lack of time and resources. Identify the tasks that you might consider automating, number one. Then step number two would be to score and prioritize. That means that you would basically rank the opportunities by pillar count. So if there's only one of these 6 pillars that applies, that's a certain score. If 2 of them applies, that's a higher score. For example, what you could do is once you assign a number, let's say 1 for each of the pillars to make it simple, then you simply add how many pillars qualify for that particular process or task, and then you make your list, and then you simply sort it from the highest to lowest number, and that'll give you the priorities of what to automate first, next, and so on. In terms of number 3 there, it says build business case, and that's when you're looking to get the details. If you apply automation to this particular process or this particular task, how much time are you going to save? How much money are you going to save? What kind of quality of the end result is there going to be by doing so? And that's potentially, if you're not in charge of the company, then you might have to make a case to whoever is in charge so they can make a decision. Do we want to spend the time and money to automate? And if so, you need to give reasons why. And then finally, after all of that is done, you need to actually execute, because none of these initial 3 steps mean anything unless you actually do it. You need to identify what tools to use, how to use them, and then actually go ahead and execute to make it happen. So if you're ready to get started, then obviously you already can, using whatever knowledge you have. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. And if you actually need assistance with automation, that's one of the things we do at PCS. We'll be happy to talk to you. We can either do consulting to show you what you could do based on our conversation, or you can hire us to actually get it all executed. To schedule a one-on-one with us, please use the URL on the screen, and we'll be happy to talk to you and take care of it. Thank you. Till next time, I'm Oleg.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.